We are on the road again. Good afternoon, Senator Nagel and Representative Stover, members of the committee. My name is Jim Katsafikis. I'm chair of the Abandoned and Discontinued Roads Commission. And we're pleased to present with you our report. Unfortunately, perhaps too many trees were felled for this one, but we did have quite a bit of material to have to try to present. This commission was established by law back in 2022. It started meeting in October of 2022. We submitted a report February 1st of last year.
My meeting. Excuse me.
Sure. We submitted a report. We're generally authorized to meet no more than 6 times per year, but there was a bill passed this year, Chapter 743, which asked us to look at 4 specific terms in Maine law to see how these are used and to see if we recommended any changes in Maine law. And we were authorized to meet more than 6 times. So we took that authority and ran with it. We met as a commission a dozen times. We also had committee meetings to try to work a little more efficiently. The task was to take a look at specific terms: private way, private road, public easement, and consider, are there problems with the use of these in the law, and what changes would we recommend? This is a 12-member commission. We have an commission assistant, Heather Levitt-Sony, who helped us out admirably with all of our work. It was great having assistants like that. With regard to the term public way, we didn't think any changes were necessary in the state law. We thought it was understandable where it's used appropriately, either generally or in the specific chapter in which it appears. That shouldn't be a source of confusion. There's a term called public roadway, which you didn't ask us to look at, but it appears under bicycle regulation in Title 29A with regard to motor vehicles. There didn't seem any reason to have another term that could be confusing in there. And we recommend that it be replaced with public way. We think it'll do a fine job and will eliminate one additional source of confusion. As to the other terms, probably the biggest problem in Maine law is the similarity in terms and yet the differences in their use of private way and private road. There are some instances in which private way is meant to be a private road owned by an individual, controlled by an individual, a private person. And then there are instances in which private way means what it has in some instances since Maine separated from Massachusetts. And that is a roadway laid out by the towns that people can get their produce or their materials to market to the nearest public way, where the private individual who needs the way pays for the road. The government takes it, the local government, and these private ways or private ways subject to gates and bars have been part of Maine law since 1820. And they have been recognized by Maine law up until 1977, when the legislature deemed that they become public easements. So we have these private ways, which are really roadways in which the public has a right. But it's certainly private way, certainly sounds like it's privately owned. And there are some instances where the legislature has used it in that context. These terms, private way and private road, appear in dozens of statutes. We asked the state legislative law and legislative library to give us a printout of all the statutes in which these appear. It was about this thick, about an inch or more. And so we've been working our way through it without being able to address all of them. We're still trying to determine in our own minds what was meant. Was it meant to be a private road or this sort of a now public easement private way? But there's one area where a majority of the commission, 8 out of the 12 commission members, felt there would be a positive statutory change. And that's with regard to a subchapter called Private Ways and Private Roads in Title 23. That's sections 3101 through 3106. 3101 through 3104 deal with having road associations. And initially said road associations on private ways. And if you meant public easements, you probably wouldn't find road associations there, because road associations are usually when private owners get together to try to take care of their roads because they're not a town way and there are no public rights. So it was confusing always with regard to that, because then when you get to 3105A and 3106, it clearly is meant to authorize the legislative body of a municipality to do work on public easements, where the legislative body says, yes, we'll maintain these public easements. So it was clear to us, or at least the majority of us, that 3101 through 3104 are meant to address generally private roads and maybe those public easements where the town doesn't maintain. Because a public easement is something where the town has the right, but not the obligation to maintain. So there may be instances where a town decides not to. And so the idea would be that 3101 through 3104 in Title 23 would authorize the use of road associations, these agreements to come together so that 4 or more landowners could form a road association on a private road or on a public easement that's not maintained by the town. And they could provide for the maintenance that way in a collaborative fashion, could send the bill. And if someone doesn't want to go along, they could be required to pay the bill for their fair share of maintenance, just like any other road association. And then to clarify in 3105A that is meant to authorize the legislative body of a municipality, the town meeting or the council, to authorize the maintenance of on a public easement, the extent of it and whether to maintain it. And then also for emergency services to allow in an instance, the public to provide an ambulance or plow to get out so the ambulance can get there, or the fire trucks or whatever. So those are the recommendations that this commission was able to arrive at. One of these changes to the road association statutes and public easement statutes in Title 23, Section 3101 through 3106, and then also to eliminate that term roadways, so that it won't cause any mischief. There's certainly many things that we spoke of. We talked about ideas, for example, to provide immunity to landowners who maintain a public easement because the town isn't maintaining it. But we were unable to reach agreement on these things. So we discussed them, and we know there are many more instances in which public road and private way are used in statute that we need to go through and obtain some clarity on our own as a commission to be able to effectively report back to you, to this commission, this committee, any changes that we might recommend. So that's the Reader's Digest abridged version of what we've been doing for the last year. Be glad to try to answer any questions you may have.
So towns can maintain public easements?
They can. A public easement is think of a town way as being the highest form of a road, and that's something that the town has a legal obligation to maintain safe and convenient for passage.
The road out here?
The road out here. If it's been accepted by the town as a town way, the town or city has to maintain it. And it's liable for its failure to maintain. The highway defect law applies, Maine Tort Claim Act applies, all of those things. At the other end of the spectrum is a private road, and the public cannot spend money to maintain private roads. That would violate the public purpose doctrine, and we shouldn't be there. That would be the driveway that you might have, or a long driveway that might serve a series of people where it's owned privately. You find that along road, a lot of lakes, coastal areas. In between are these public easements, and these either are the old private ways that were laid out since 1820, 1821 to get agricultural products to market or whatever, or they're the leftovers after abandonment or discontinuance of a road, after statutory abandonment or discontinuance. Those are private ways, public easements. And these public easements, the public has a right to access, and the town or city has a right to maintain to the extent that its legislative body desires. Hope that makes it think of it as being in the middle of that spectrum.
So the town, so if the town is maintaining a public easement, why isn't it just a town road?
Because it's not the high level of maintenance. It's not safe and convenient for passage. It could be just grading once a year and maybe plowing if there are winter residents. Maybe there aren't. Maybe it's just used in the summer. Okay. So that's why if it was discontinued and you wound up with a public easement, as can happen, the idea is that you're at least allowing access. And so damages are reduced and the public can still get out there. People may live on there, but usually it wouldn't have been discontinued if people are still living there on a year-round basis. Might have been closed to winter maintenance, but if they're not there then, but it wouldn't be discontinued completely.
Okay, so let me ask you this, and I think I haven't read the Manter's comments yet, but I'll bet I'm going where they want me to go. A town abandons a roadway,
Mhm.
but they maintain a public easement on it.
Right.
How can the town maintain an easement on an abandoned road that they are not providing any maintenance to?
That they, meaning the town.
Yeah,
Okay, let's go back just a little ways. A town can discontinue a road. Discontinuance means it's been an accepted town way, but for some reason, maybe it doesn't meet standards and it's not being used. The town may say, we don't want to be responsible for maintaining this year-round safe and convenient for passage by motor vehicles. The town can discontinue it. The problem is if I own property along there, my deed is mentioned the town road that comes up.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean the town has to forever maintain it, but it means that's my access. I probably don't have a private easement right to get from the nearest public road to my house. And so since 1965, the presumption in Maine law has been when there's a discontinuance of a town way, and then later, since 1976, a statutory abandonment because the town hasn't spent money for 30 consecutive years or more in maintaining it, there is automatically retained a public easement, which allows the town to still come on and maintain it. It's a right, but not an obligation. And it depends on the circumstances. The legislative body would have to vote. So it does two things. It enables public access, and it therefore enables these people who otherwise would be landlocked because they didn't have an easement in their deed
Okay.
to still continue to have access. And then they can go to the town meeting or go to the town council and ask, could you please grade, plow, maintain, whatever? And the town may not do it. The town can do it. It has the right, but not the obligation. So it's a lower level of maintenance responsibility, but it's at least to provide access to people who might otherwise have been landlocked upon discontinuance or statutory abandonment of their town way.
okay. Now, you also said during your summary, which is good, why 4 landowners to create a road maintenance association?
The statute is set out 4 or more people may form a road association. 4 or more
And the-
landowners.
And I assume that the changes in here are what you propose we change statutorily.
That is correct. And again, that was by vote of 8-2 with 1 abstention and 1 absence.
Okay.
Just to be clear.
Is this a huge change in law?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think particularly the change with regard to the municipal side is more a recognition of what's been done all along anyway, a clarification and a clearer authority perhaps for municipalities. And on the other side, it doesn't require you to join a road association. You know, it's always been an option. And I think a concern of the Manters, and Roberta Manter is a fellow commissioner on this, and I respect their opinion on this, but we disagree a bit on this piece. And I'm sure she will explain her reasoning on this. But a concern that was raised was you shouldn't have to join a road association and be forced to pay, because you might decide there are 4 more owners, there are 6 owners, 2 of you don't want to join, you want to just take care of the road yourselves, or you want to do something informally. Well, if there's a road association, you can be required to be part of that and pay for that road repair and maintenance, because otherwise the 4 can't get it done. So let's say that, you know, to the end of the road, the 4th person lives at the end of the road and 2 people up front are saying, I don't want to join. Well, the other 4 are going to be maintaining it in order to make sure they can get down there. So you've got 2 free riders on there. Okay, so the idea is you could force those other 2 now to make payments.
Whether they belong to
Whether
the
they
association
belong
or not.
right. And you can send them the bill, and that can be, their payment can be required. And so the way that we've drafted this is to make it clear it applies to private road associations, but also in the instance where there's a public easement where the town doesn't maintain it. And you still want to be able to make sure everybody pitches in. And so the Manter's objection to that is you can be forced to pay as a private person, private funds to maintain a road for public access where the public has a right to go on. And they believe that that's unconstitutional in the same way that I believe it's unconstitutional to spend public funds to repair and maintain a private road.
Right.
So they're looking
Well,
at
we
it
know
as
that's the case.
we know that's the case.
The law
They're-
courts ruled on that.
correct. The law court has not spoken on the other issue. And so I think Ms. Manter would prefer to see an opinion of the justices on that. That's noted in the report.
Right.
So that's, I think, the difference of opinion.
Yeah. They're kind of preaching to the choir on me, with me on this. If if the general public is going to have access to a road and have the ability to beat it up, you know what I mean? I mean, wouldn't it?
Well, then the town may not maintain it. Some of those roads are in pretty sad shape,
Right.
and then you could wind up with a lot of landlocked lots because it will no longer have at least the public easement of access to be able to get to and from their roads because they never
Oh, I
got a
see.
deeded easement.
Okay.
So
It's a balancing act.
correct.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I get it. I mean, we've been through this and I get it. But aside for the maintenance and the paying, I want to talk about this language change. of
Which one, please? I'm sorry.
Private way to public easement.
Yes.
Now, I don't know how many registries of deeds have documents with these terms in there. And I don't know how many estate planning documents have these words in there.
Mm.
And so I think it's huge. You mentioned it was a inch thick paper,
Right.
that had these things mentioned in it. That's a lot of changes for a lot of people. And is it really necessary to make that change? I mean, that's stirring a lot of pots, and people who have known what their road is all their lives are now going to be told it's something else. And I think it's going to start quite a boiling pot of mad people.
Well, I'm sure there will be some reaction to this proposal. Okay. But the legislature decided back in 1977 or 76 that what formerly had been called private ways are now public easements, but did not go back and change this law. So if they've been called public easements since then using the term in the same title, Title 23, can cause some confusion. I mean, in other sections in Title 23, 3201, there's a definition of public easement which says, and also all private ways existing as of this date.
All right, so if you're going to change this phraseology, all of those things that could have meant something ambiguous now specifically fit this other notch without any consideration of how that was derived.
Well, I think that was why we didn't want to go headlong and make that change throughout all of the other sections of state statute. We think that we want to look at those individually and see, well, what really was the intent? Was it a private road, or was it one of these old private ways?
Right, so I
And-
think
and-
an inch of paper with all of these on there, each one is its own story.
Right, but we thought
How
this
can we
was a
just
safe,
do a carte blanche? Okay, we're gonna
Well,
change this to that.
we thought this was a safe place to start because it involves the private roads. And it seemed to be a better place to start the process without causing problems in too many other places.
So what does happen with deeds that refer to a private road?
Well, with deeds that refer to a private road, they continue in force. There never was an issue. With those that say private way subject to gates and bars, you would be judging the deed by what the terminology was at the time.
Okay.
And so I don't think anybody is going to write a deed since 1977 that talks about a private way subject to gates and bars. Because that wasn't the terminology in use from then on out.
Okay,
What about people who have the only access to their road and, it's a public easement
Mhm.
and they have to repair it after the logging trucks go through?
Right.
You know the scenario
I
I'm
do.
talking about. What there? I mean,
Well, right now, if the town does not maintain it, which, has, as we said, the right but not the obligation to do any work on that, then it's going to fall to the people who want to use that road to repair it, which is what's been happening.
and if they don't, then the people in the home can't get in or out.
That's right. Now, there are some criminal statutes and all that would allow you to go after the logger who rips up the road.
Then
I
you
know that
have-
as a practical purpose, a
Right.
practical matter, it's hard to find that person or not to malign ATV riders, but those who might tear up the road, you can't find them afterwards.
Well, and I also think about snowmobilers who might cross those tracks. And I know that what was it, in Gray, Maine, there was a decapitation for a kid riding a slow thing. So I'm not all about bars and stuff like that. I mean, keep the big logging trucks off the road when they actually have access around the other side. But I don't think that we need bars and whatever it was you said all
Well,
over
I'd
the
say subject to
state.
gates and bars. That's the old term. It's been done
Yeah,
since
I don't like that at
forever.
all.
Understood.
but if we change this, does that change it so that gates and bars are no longer,
This does nothing to gates and bars. What this does is just with regard to public easements. Well, it's allowing you to have a road association on a public easement if the town is not maintaining the way, just as you can have a road association for a private road now. And you probably could have one for a public easement. It's always said private way. We want to make it just clear as to what that means. And what this also does is clarify that the source of municipal authority is 3105 to be able to maintain public easements to the extent authorized by the municipal legislative body. That's been everyone's understanding of the law in other organizations, Maine Municipal Association and its legal staff. I'm not speaking for them, but I had worked there. And it also, I think, clarifies that municipalities can get on and spend that public money on even a public easement in an emergency to make sure that police and fire can get there in a response. So I think those things are beneficial and don't jeopardize or don't create problems in other sections of the title. I appreciate that there are other references to private ways and public easements and private roads, and we're not touching those. We're focusing on just trying to solve this problem here as a starting place.
Well, but if something says in one part of the law that, it's a private way, and then in other, titles, it's called something else. I mean, that's not really,
Well, the legislature has already put up with private ways having been subsumed by public easements. They're now called public easements since 1977, and these other statutes have all been on the books. So it's a place to start that shouldn't cause mischief elsewhere.
it's a start.
It's a start, and we're not trying to drag things out. It's just as a
No.
commission, there's an awful lot to wade through for the very reason that I think this committee created the commission to help you wade through it.
absolutely.
So it might take more than 6 meetings this year in order to get more work done. But if we could have permission for that, that would be great.
So moved.
That would
would
be
be a
part of the
bill.
bill as it was last
Right.
time.
So we're,
You have this? Okay.
and we could do that right now.
I didn't mean to create a problem.
No, they want more time to meet.
We would need to change the statute. Because the statute says 6.
So it'd have to be a whole new bill.
No, or what you could do
Or
is
we can
if you
report it
had
up.
a new, we've proposed a bill, if you were to carry that forward and then you could put a paragraph at the end as you did in the one last year that would say, and the commission is authorized to meet more than 6 times in 2024.
You can do that in session, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, do we have to go through ledge council or can we, or can we just amend this?
So what you would, this report gives you the authority to report out legislation. So you would want to create a bill. It could be just to authorize 6 meetings. It could be to do more than 6. It could be to do all these other things. You'd have to send it to the committee, would vote on it, report it out, would go to the House and Senate to be referred back.
Okay.
So similar to what you did for the auditor's report,
Okay,
but you can do that. Yes.
are we all good with sending this?
So because you don't have a quorum or a senator, you can't vote.
What am I?
Oh, sorry.
We have a second.
We don't have a quorum. Because you don't have a quorum, you can't vote on this, and you also might want, so we can put it on the agenda for next week to have a follow-up discussion on this.
Okay,
Okay,
But we'll still hear from the Manters today, right?
I'll vacate my seat. That's all right.
Yep.
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Since you said you're letting me speak.
Yeah,
I have no problem.
sure.
Thank you.
I mean, you know, we don't want to go on for an hour, but
Right.
you know,
First of all, I want to say I'm blown away by everybody who has shown up at the commission meetings almost every single time.
Mhm.
I've really been impressed with that. I'm the one probably who has the most invested in it, and yet everybody else shows up. And I want to give them congratulations and thanks for that. I wanted to answer a couple of your questions. As far as changing the terminology and that causing confusion because the word appears in so many places in the record, the problem is they already did that in 1976. And that's what's caused a lot of this trouble because they took the term private way, which had meant, as Mr. Katsifika said, it had meant where a road was laid out to allow somebody to get their produce to market or that sort of thing. And yet they changed it in 1976 to say that it means that, and it also means a road that's been abandoned or discontinued where they've kept a public easement over it to avoid landlocking people. But that's not the same thing. These, the older private ways were invariably dead ends, and they primarily served one property. It was laid out at the request of somebody who had improved land that was not yet connected to the public road system. And because it just went to that one property, there wasn't likely to be a whole lot of public traffic on it. The public could use it if they wanted to, but generally it was to do business with the person who asked for it. So that was reasonable. But when you start saying that that's the same thing as a discontinued road, most of these roads that we're seeing problems with, and I have a map with 260 or something pins in it, 1 pin per town where I've identified a problem road. And that's just 1 pin per town. Most of the towns that have problem roads have multiple problem roads. But most of the ones that are problems are the ones that were through roads, and they still appear on GPS as being through roads. So you get the tractor trailer truck at 6 o'clock in the morning thinking it's a shortcut to get to the camp in the next town. And you have to help him back up a quarter of a mile to where he can get turned around because the middle of the road is not fit for a tractor trailer. You get people who are just looking for a place to try out their 4-wheel drive. And in mud season, you get a lot of people that are using the road who have no real reason to be there. And consequently, they don't care what they leave behind them. And that's where a lot of these problems come. The reason they kept public easements when they discontinued roads is so they wouldn't leave people legally landlocked, but it leaves them physically landlocked because nobody's maintaining the road and yet the public can keep on using it. And that's where a lot of the big problems come in. Let's see, as far as towns may maintain public easements, yes, they may, but most of them don't. We have heard that there are some towns that apparently vote on it each year, whether they're going to maintain these roads or not. Our experience with most of these roads is that the town won't even put it on the warrant to ask if they want to put any maintenance in these roads. If you get together enough signatures to force them to put it on the warrant, then the town votes no, because they don't want to spend money on this little used road that they don't care about, but they still want to keep their public right to use it. The problem with having a road association on a public easement is that under the road association statutes, you can force everybody to pay. If they don't pay, you can file a notice of claim against them. You can even take them to small claims court. You can force them to pay for the maintenance of that road, which if it's a private road and it's only being used by those people on the private road, it's reasonable they should each share their fair share of the maintenance. But should they have to pay their fair share? What's a fair share of maintenance for a public road where there are people coming in and out and using it at times when the people who live there would not use it because they don't want to chew it up? But the public has a right to come in, use it anytime. And trying to catch the person who did damage has proven almost impossible in most cases. If you do catch them, then you almost have to have had photographs taken just before they damaged it and while they're damaging it to prove that they were the one who did it, and after they damaged it, so that you can tell exactly how much damage they did. Otherwise, you haven't really got a court case. So it sounds like a good solution, but in practice, it really doesn't work very well. So the two big things that we need to get the commission back to trying to solve, it's loss of access on these roads that were discontinued before 1965 with no easement retained, where maybe people have continued to use them for years, but then somebody new comes in and buys property on both sides of the road and says, well, I own the property to the middle of the road from both sides, I'm putting up a gate. And all of a sudden the people beyond it have no access. And the other problem is where they do keep a public easement, but the public easement gets torn up by public use with no public maintenance. We would like to see this go to the Maine Supreme Court. They were the ones who put out an opinion of the justices saying that you cannot spend public funds to maintain private roads. So you could ask the Maine Supreme Court to look at this question of is it constitutional to require private landowners to maintain a public road? And the precedent for that is in the case of Jordan versus Canton. Maine Municipal Association has said that that's not relevant because it applied to a law that got repealed. So they wanted to throw out the whole case. But if you read the wording of the case, it says that it doesn't matter what the legal status of a road is. What matters is what are the practical and factual consequences of governmental action. And it says that when there is a public road with no public maintenance, the road will inevitably be destroyed. And that destroys property access, which is a right attached to the property. And when that access is taken or damaged, it requires both due process and just compensation. Well, how do you make just compensation when it keeps getting repeated? You can compensate the person when you discontinue the road. So then they rebuild the road so they can get to their property, and the public comes in and destroys it, and they rebuild it again, and the public comes in and destroys it, and they rebuild. Where's the compensation for that? You can't make one-time compensation for something that keeps going. And what I've tried to do is to come up with some simple solutions, which, in practice, nothing is as simple as it sounds, but it's a place to start. Look at some of the things I've suggested in the paper that I put in. Use that as a jumping off point to try to figure out what would work. What can we do? How can we make it simple for people to have some kind of solution for these problems? So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer.
So one of the problems is that if we mandate towns to start and you can clarify, if we mandate towns to start maintaining these public easements, it would be an unfunded
Unfunded
mandate,
mandate.
correct? So
Yeah.
the state would be on the hook for 90%. So I get that. What is how would we get the law court to give us a ruling on something like this? Are we able to ask for an advisory ruling or?
If I may.
Yeah,
Jim Katsifikis again. You would ask the law court to declare it a solemn occasion, and you could present a question for them to address. When Roberta Manter said "we," I think she was speaking on behalf of,
Maine
Re-
ROADWays, not
and not the
Yeah.
commission, so I just wanted to make that clear.
Say that at the
that-
beginning, and then-
That's okay.
that's okay.
The one thing to think about though is that, initially when many of these roads were discontinued or abandoned by statute, it's because they weren't in use. And the public easement was there retained to just make sure that at least the landowner would have access and would be landlocked. That made the land pretty cheap. And so there may not have been people living there at the time, but because the land is so cheap, unless the municipality had an ordinance, like a building permit ordinance, that would say you can't build on anything unless it's a town way, people are going to build out there. And then this problem happens afterwards. So just,
The LUPC, they have that a lot, I think.
Yeah, we like to say that Maine Roadways motto is build a better public easement and the world will beat the pathway to your door.
Mhm.
And what we found is somebody moves in onto this little discontinued road, like my husband did in 1971. And he went to the town and said, what's the status of the road? And they said, we ain't got nothing to do with that road. And he said, well, fine, I guess it's not your problem. I'll rebuild the road myself and I'll put up a gate to keep people from tearing it up. And as soon as he put up a gate, the town came in, cut the gate down, hauled it off, posts and all. Because it's a public easement. Well, he didn't know it was a public easement. In fact, it wasn't until 5 years after he bought his property that they changed the law to say that it was a public easement. So, people say, well, you knew what you bought when you bought it. No, in most cases, people don't know what they're buying. And they think, well, yeah, the road's in bad shape, I can fix it. But as soon as they fix it, everybody else says, oh, look, we can use that road now. And they do. Sometimes with log trucks, sometimes with an ATV or a
Right.
four-wheel drive in mud season.
Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, it sounds like it's trying to be escalated to the law court. And we put your commission together to figure this out. I mean, we could have just done that too, but it's so complex. It affects so many things. I would say keep working and find that magic language or something that we can do.
One of the solutions that I've offered is when they say it's an unfunded mandate to force a town to maintain the road. When a property goes from being an undeveloped property to, and maybe in tree growth, where the town is getting minimal tax revenue from that lot, and it goes from there to being a residential property. And then as we've seen, one person puts in a residence and fixes up the road, and the other people say, oh, look, now we can get in there, and they put in residences. Now you've got 4 or 5 houses, each being taxed at the residential rate. That's a whole lot more revenue for the town than what they were getting off of tree growth. Why can't they take just a percentage of that increase in revenue and put it back into the road that generated it? There's your funding. So, this is one of the simple solutions that we've suggested.
Right, but you know very well that Maine is a local control state.
Right.
And that's real.
But I think we have a start. And let's just keep taking baby steps until that's all we can do, really, I think. Like I said, you're preaching to the choir on the town easement, but I know the logistics of how that will go if we drop that in their lap. You know what I mean? It'll be a nightmare for us, we'll never hear the end of it.
There are two.
And I don't
things-
think it would pass across the tunnel either, you know?
There are two things that I think the commission is making good progress on. One is working on limited landowner liability for where somebody is maintaining a road and somebody else comes in and gets injured or damages their vehicle. Or where there is environmental damage that isn't the fault of the person who's been maintaining the road. They shouldn't have to be liable for that. So that's
Right.
one thing we've been working on. I think we're close. Another thing that I think is big progress is that Pete Coughlin of the DOT has been working with E911 to get information about roads that are not maintained by the town. We have the DOT map viewer site, which has been wonderful. It tells you what roads are being maintained by towns. It's not 100% accurate because the information is gained from the town road commissioner. And sometimes they just stop maintaining a road without discontinuing it. So it doesn't necessarily indicate the legal status of the road, but it's someplace to start with. And if we can add to that roads that are privately maintained that we know of, that adds another whole big piece of it. So that will help people who are maybe looking at a property to be able to look at the map viewer and say, oh, well, look, this road isn't maintained by the public. We better look into who does maintain it, if anyone. So that I think is going to be a big plus.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm glad you guys are working on that. I mean, this stuff really needs to be worked out. But I'm just sitting here looking at this and saying that the municipality, this, that, and the other thing, and I know that public money can't be used for private use. But I do agree that that a public easement should be maintained by a public entity, right? So, but if we would put these changes in, now it goes into zoning and charters and, you know, it's a lot for a small town. I mean, I can speak for Saco that we have the staff for this, but the small towns is what we're talking about here. And I don't know that they have, you know, we just had a presentation from GoPIF that to help with planning again, because there's no planning offices in a lot of towns. So if we were going to change all of this and they're going to have to, you know, change signs and, you know, all the things that they're going to have to do in their zoning, this is a big ask. This is a lot to ask of them. And then if we say, yes, you need to do it, then that's a mandate from us again. So I don't think we get scot-free on any of this, but
Which is why we haven't gotten further with it.
right, which is why we gave it to you.
So she just brought up a great question for me, or piqued a question. So she said that there, on the DOT map, there are towns that have stopped maintaining a road, but they haven't officially abandoned it. Can they do that?
Boy, I'm gonna get myself in trouble. There is a concept called abandonment in common law, and that is if the public stops using the way as a public way for 20 or more years, then it's deemed abandoned and the town doesn't have to maintain it anymore. Now it's, well, 20 for statutory, for common law abandonment, and it's what I'm talking about, is a common law, judge-made law concept. What the legislature did back in 1976 is say, well, let's look at another way of getting there. And that is, if a town hasn't spent 30 consecutive years between at least 1946 and 1976, hasn't spent money maintaining a road, then we're going to deem that it is abandoned. So it's a presumption of abandonment that would arise if a town didn't spend money for 30 years. So that's your instance. The town stopped spending money on it and didn't tell anybody. And so that would result in abandonment of that way, which would have the same legal effect as discontinuance. It's different. Discontinuance is a positive act. You know,
Right.
the town says you go to town meeting, you vote on it, you award damages, there's notice, there's hearing. It's an affirmative act. abandonment just happens because you haven't been doing what you're supposed to have been doing for long enough that you don't have to do it anymore, as someone once said.
Almost like a stopple,
On that idea.
right? Or,
And the problem is that common law abandonment is fact specific to prove that the public hasn't been using it for 20 consecutive years. It's very difficult to prove. The idea of having a statutory presumption makes it a little easier, and that's why the legislature codified it. So you don't have to go to court and spend $100,000 every time you want to talk about whether a road has been abandoned by common law. But it still resulted in litigation.
yeah,
So much for that theory. But yes, there are instances where a town just stops maintaining a way. It's not common. Well, I
Well-
don't think so, but
so what if,
US Constitution.
what if, I'm getting into speculation here, and I know we want to wrap this up.
Mhm.
The town says nobody's using it, but there is documentation that trucks are using it. Right, as a public, you know what I'm saying?
could be the trucks are using it as a cut through. It could be that logging trucks are using it to reach the logging,
Right,
which is maybe different than the residential users who could be using it.
yeah,
They-
okay.
It's a
There's
very
100
difficult-
different
Right.
permutations that, okay. Yep,
I'm wondering if I haven't looked recently at who are members on your commission. Do you have anybody from the lumber, people on there? They're
Maine
talking,
Woodlands.
what?
Woodlands, but those
Yeah.
are more private.
Okay. Because if there wasn't, a way to let them know that we're gonna either cut them off or what, they might come to the table a little bit more calmer and work with everything. Saying,
I think enforcement is the issue. How you gonna enforce it, you know?
Relying upon sheriffs, relying
Right.
upon, and it just takes a while before someone can get to the scene and the trucks are long gone or the
Right.
ATVs.
why can't there just be a conversation between parties?
Nothing prohibits that.
Right. And sometimes sitting down and have a conversation and saying, hey, you could go over there, but instead you're going here. Please think about it. I gotta live here. And get human to human. Sometimes bring it right down to the ground. I'm just putting that out there. It's your commission, but
Okay,
Could I say one more thing?
oh, yeah, sure.
As far as can a town just stop maintaining a road? Title 23, Section 3651 says that towns have an obligation to keep their roads safe and convenient for travelers with motor vehicles. So in order to stop maintaining a road without discontinuing it, they are breaking that law. If they break the law for 30 years, they can then walk away from it because
Right,
it's been abandoned, but they're not supposed to do it. That was not the intent of abandonment in the first place. If you read the legislative discussion when they were considering putting through the abandonment statute, it was very clear that they wanted this to apply to roads that had been forgotten, that they'd slipped through the cracks, nobody even knew where they were. And then somebody comes along and says, oh, look, there used to be a road here. Let's make the
Mhm.
town fix it. That was what it was supposed to apply to. It was not supposed to allow a town to say, let's just stop maintaining this road. And if we get away with it for 30 years, then we don't have to maintain it anymore. Where else is there a law that says that if you break the law long enough, you're not guilty of breaking the law anymore?
yeah, but that would be taken up on a case-by-case basis, I would imagine. I mean, there's not, I don't think we can sit here and legislate that. But, okay, well, thank you. Thank you for all your hard
patience.
work.
Thank you for staying so late. I hope the driving isn't too bad.
I got snow tires. I hope the rest of you do.